Hello, my name is Tracy Curtis. We have been running these seminars for almost a year now, and every single one we start with a land acknowledgement. We have done this as a formal statement that recognizes the enduring relationship that exists between the Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. To recognize that the land is an expression of gratitude and respect and appreciation for those whose territory that we all reside. To seek understanding of our place within this history. This is especially difficult this week with the discovery of the remains of 215 Indigenous children at a former residential school in British Columbia. These children died of malnutrition and abuse. We must ask the questions. How many more beautiful little bodies are buried that were taken from their mothers and their fathers and stripped of their culture? And just imagine that the community had knowledge of these missing children. This is a time of a collection pain, anger, shame, and grief. Today is June 1st, the first day of National Indigenous History Month. Let's all dig deep within ourselves to stand as a reminder that we must continue to learn the truths of our lands that we call home and stand strong with our communities as we heal. We must commit to not turn our heads and to understand the painful history that was created right here in Canada. From the Anishinaabes to the Adirondacks, to the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these treaty lands are steeped in rich Indigenous history and modern traditions. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor the respect, the four directions: land, water, plants, and animals. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit on which territory that we are meeting here today. We'd like to take a moment of silence for us all, just reflect and think about not just those 215 children, but their parents, their grandparents, their communities, and all the people that were affected and that are continually being affected. So we'll all just take a moment of silence together. Thank you. I drove by the Church of Our Lady tonight, and there were all the shoes that are gathering and the memorials and teddy bears outside our front doors. So let's keep this conversation present and forefront as we move forward. So thank you. I'll introduce Marva Wisdom, our wonderful moderator for tonight, and thank you so much for all that are here. And thank you to Nicola and Anne-Marie and Helen and Marva for volunteering your time to help us. Take care.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I just want to let you know how very much those words and that acknowledgement is appreciated and necessary and needed. It is interesting, for lack of a better word, that this is the start of Indigenous Month. Really, it is Indigenous Month year on an ongoing basis because of the land that we are on. And today is also the start of Pride Month. So as an equity-seeking woman, let me acknowledge that I am on land of those right holders that rightfully belongs to those children that were killed and their families and their next generations, and all the mothers and fathers and parents and generations who are now grieving with another gaping hole, another wound that has not healed from residential schools. So let me just say that I hope that each of us not just on this panel, but broadly listening to this, will commit to doing something toward reconciliation, toward truth, starting now, starting tonight, if we haven't started yet. And if we have, let's continue this action and make it visible and talk to each other and recognize that we are the government. So when we look to government to fix things, that we are the government and we can make change happen. I am really delighted to be here among our incredible panelists again this month, and that you have joined us. And so each month, Anne-Marie and Helen are usually joined by one or two panelists answering questions in mental health. And in the last few months, we have had the great fortune to have a wonderful other third panelist joining us. And I'm going to introduce her very soon. I'll tell you who that is. Mrna Zadlik is a primary care physician in Guelph who provides comfort and guidance to thousands during the pandemic. She was and is a Facebook sensation with her daily posts of encouragement and sound scientific knowledge about COVID-19 and other health issues. We're glad to have her. And Helen Fishburn is the Executive Director of the Canadian Mental Health Association of Waterloo, Wellington. She is a lifelong advocate for increased awareness of mental health issues, and she has dedicated her career to advancing the design of an improved mental health care system. And tonight we had commented a little bit about how Anne-Marie was feeling and how many people are feeling, and Anne-Marie at the forefront as a physician. Healthcare professionals are all tired. So let us also acknowledge the work that all of you are doing and continue to do. We know that you're tired and we appreciate the sacrifices you're making for us. I don't think we could have asked for a better leader through this crisis for this region and beyond than Dr. Nicola Mercer. And she is our guest this evening, and we're so thrilled that she has made time the last few months to be with us. She's, of course, our Medical Officer of Health for Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph. She has provided knowledge, steady and empathetic scientific leadership throughout this pandemic. She is our region's treasure and beyond. We're so happy to have Anne-Marie, Helen, and Nicola joining us. And we look forward to answering your questions. And before I ask them to open with a few remarks, I have some housekeeping rules that I must share. Otherwise, the people behind this who are doing the organizing and making sure that everything is a go tonight, and that would be Allison Demay and Dumoy. Sorry, Allison, I can't believe I messed up your last name. Allison is back there, and so is Tracy, and we thank them so much. So here are the housekeeping rules that they would love for me to share with you. Whether you're joining us on Zoom or webinar or via Facebook live broadcast, we want you to know that we want to answer as many of your questions as possible. Please send them in, and if we can't answer them all tonight, we will work to answer them not live, but answer them on one of those sites. We know that a lot of you listen afterwards and some may not be able to tune in. So the webinar is going to be posted on CMHA's Waterloo Wellington webpage and on Dr. Zadlik's Facebook pages after this is over. It might give us a day or so, give us a little while to recover, and we will have it posted for you. So let's now start the discussion with some opening statements, and in order of the names that I'm calling, we'll start with Helen, and then Anne-Marie, and then Nicola. So Helen, if you will, please.
I have to unmute myself. That's pretty important. Thanks so much, Mrna. And as usual, it's great to be with the panel tonight, despite our hearts being very heavy. But it's a really important conversation for us as we continue on this long and winding pandemic road. We're moving in a really good direction, and that's because all of you have done what our community needs. You've followed provincial guidelines, you've rolled your sleeve up and got that vaccine, which has been awesome. And it's been so gratifying to see our COVID numbers declining while our vaccination numbers are rising. And even though things are slowly getting better, and we'll soon start seeing those restrictions ease slowly but surely, we know that our mental health is not, there's not a magic wand for it. It's not poof and all of a sudden we feel better. It doesn't quite work that way. We have lots of layers, we have lots of things to unpack. And for some of us, these restrictions can't be lifted fast enough. We can't wait to have another house party and have it full of people that we love. And on the other end of the continuum, we have people that are really scared and anxious about leaving their home and going back out into the world as we know it. So we have all of us process these things differently, and we have to be patient with each other and ourselves, certainly. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about that, some things to think about as we approach re-entry. We'll also talk a little bit about some tips for folks who are struggling with vaccine hesitancy as well. So again, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to the discussion.
So I'll just speak briefly. I'm answering questions already. That's what I do. Okay, so I've noticed in the last month a real deterioration in people's mental and emotional health. That's interesting because the number of vaccines has increased astronomically, but it just goes to show how long we've been under this incredible collective stress. And none of us really know the long-term effects of that. None of us know even the short-term effects of that. We'll know in hindsight 5 years from now when all sorts of research has been done about what happened to our brains as we were going through this. But something significant is happening, and I agree it will have its long-term effects. So I want to kind of pull out from under this heaviness that I feel as well in the last month, just fatigue and missing people like I never thought I would before. We have improved or come so far since May 16th. I think we had a webinar on May 16th and then another one on the 24th or something like that. Canada had administered 10 million doses of vaccine on the 16th of May, 16 million by the 24th, 24 million today. That's 57% of Canadians that have had vaccines. And on some days, the number of doses given are more than 400,000 per day, with many more vaccines arriving. And we should see a real increase in the number of second doses that people receive, likely shorter than that 6-week interval. Everyone's afraid and anxious about getting that vaccine or about getting that vaccine. So there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy. It's almost like the folks that are passing along misinformation are really working hard right now because they're probably anxious too. And I understand that. But all I can say is stay the course, stay strong, get those vaccines. Collectively, Canadians are doing so extremely well. We all have to work together as a unit. I think province by province, we need to get to working together again so that we get to 75% of all of Canadians vaccinated, and then suddenly we'll feel refreshed and start to feel even better as time goes on. So that's my main message tonight.
That's great. Thanks, Anne-Marie. And over to Dr. Mercer. Who's on mute? Like I do that all the time, Nicola, all the time.
Yeah, I'm on my phone, so I'm not
There you go.
sure why I'm on mute.
There you go.
You're good.
Okay.
We
All
hear
right,
you.
that's great. Just wanting to say thank you for having me back. It's wonderful to be here. I think if I was going to really talk about my main message tonight, it's one of we are very close to crossing the line with our first doses. So locally in our area, Wellington, Guelph, and Guelph, in the entire health unit, I need about 7,400 people, more people to register, to book an appointment, or to go get a vaccine. That's it, 7,400 people, and that will make us pass the 75% mark for everyone 12 and up. So that is great news. It's within our grasp. We all know a few people that maybe we can encourage to get their vaccine. I want people to really think about getting their vaccine in June. Just like when Anne-Marie said that we're going to be getting lots of second doses. In fact, it's going to be the summer of the second dose. And there's going to be a lot of people getting second doses in July and August. In particular, our youth are scheduled for our young adults, and our 12 to 17-year-olds are scheduled in August. But if you are somebody who's going to wait, there's not going to be as many opportunities in July, August to receive the vaccine because we have so many people coming back for second doses. So we have the vaccine. We're wanting to give first doses in June. If you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence, if you know somebody who might get a vaccine, help them to get vaccinated in the month of June. That's my message.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicola. We appreciate the work that you are doing. And again, we appreciate you being here very much. I'm going to start with the first question from Carrie. And she says, please explain reopening. What happens tomorrow on June 2nd versus June 14th? Will stores be able to remove barriers to some sections tomorrow? And can we travel to other regions? And I'll ask you if you could answer that, Nicola.
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly one that when I saw the sort of the reopening plan, to be perfectly honest, I had to kind of go and look it up myself because I was wondering what happens on June the 2nd. Do we get to open the stores? Do we get to go and do all the things we want? And the answer is no. So the plan is actually built into the legislation. So until we get to step one, we're really sort of where we are now. So don't plan on doing anything different. The stay-at-home order is still actually in the legislation. So don't plan on having get-togethers. Wait until we get to step one. Pretty good evidence that step one's coming very soon. It might be sometime in the next 10 days. So we're not that far away from it. So just hang in there, do everything that you're doing today, and we are going to get to step one, and that's when the patios will open of our favorite restaurants, so we can all go out and sit on them.
That's great. Oh, wow, what a picture. The visual is lovely. And this one's for Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie, this person, Tina, just had her second vaccine, which was Pfizer, on May 29th. And she's scheduled for a mammogram on June 4th. Is there any reason why she wouldn't be able to keep the appointment?
Nope, not at all. So the mammogram, first of all, is a uncomfortable but fairly simple exam that doesn't involve having any substance being put into your body. And so the vaccine doesn't interact with the mammogram doesn't affect the vaccine. One thing you might notice is that if you're uncomfortable after the vaccine and it's been given on in one deltoid, that you may have more discomfort on that side when you have the mammogram done, but there's no risk at all in getting it.
Great, thank you. And Helen, Margaret is 77 years old and scheduled for her second dose of Mrna. Yay, on Friday. I must say that my parents got their second dose of Pfizer today. My sister brought them and they went out for French fries afterwards to celebrate. So my parents don't really eat junk food. So that was special knowing that they went out for French fries. This person said that she's nervous about going to stores and seeing friends even outside. She desperately wants to hug her granddaughters, but can't imagine doing that because she's so fearful of getting COVID. You're on mute, Helen.
We're seeing that a lot, Marv, actually.
Yes.
And again, we've all been looking forward to this moment so much, right? But at the same time, we've spent a year fearing catching COVID and getting sick and getting our loved ones sick. And, it's been, we've been very socialized that way now. So it's going to take us a while to start working through some of those fears as we start approaching our new world. And it's, I hate to say the word new normal, but because we don't really have normal anymore, this is going to be something that we're going to have to continually adjust and evolve because we don't really know what things are going to be like or how they will unfold. But certainly, the more people can slowly adjust to life back into the real world, the better. And again, as I said at the beginning, some people are going to adjust very quickly and can't wait, and actually might be a little too quick in their adjustments, as in ahead of times when they should be. And then other people are really going to be stuck in that place of anxiety and worry. What I would say in this situation is to really separate fact from fear. Stay really close to accurate, reliable scientific information that comes from reliable sources, so you know exactly what the science is telling us, what the restrictions are, what we can and can't do, and why. And then start separating out your fears from that and name those fears. Talk about what those fears are. Think sometimes in this world right now, because there is a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of darkness still, a lot of worry, that those two worlds can get put together, and sometimes people can't separate them out. So we want to make sure we know the facts, and it's also okay to be fearful. I think we're all going to be fearful as we re-enter and start taking that mask off and hugging people, doing the things that we've been looking forward to. So understanding what our fears are about, measuring that against the science or against the fact, and then working through that fear is going to be really, really important for all of us.
And I think in our earlier conversation, we're talking about doing your own research if you can. Just really look at the person that is providing the information and dig a little bit deeper to see what they might be connected or attached to. You'd be amazed the footprints that people leave and the information that you can find out to add to whatever information you already know. So that is really great advice, Helen. It's really, really important as we go forward. The next question I'm going to ask if Nicola can answer this one. And as we go forward, at any time, any one of our panelists that has shared something, another panelist can sort of jump in with anything additional that you have to say. I think we have a little bit of not extra time, I wouldn't say that, but I'm hoping that we'll get through all the questions. I think we have a bit more time than we're used to tonight. And the question is about kids and the vaccine, Nicola. Can you also comment about any information about kids and the vaccine, as well as dispel any rumors about infertility issues? And Anne-Marie or Helen, feel free to jump in after. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first thing I want to say is that, and you're listening to me, I'm a physician, but I also would like to encourage parents out there to go to visit a certain website. It's called kidshealthfirst.ca, kidshealthfirst altogether.ca. And this is a website from our pediatric hospital. So it's a combination of CHEO, the hospital in Ottawa, Sick Kids in Toronto, McMaster. These are experts who care, research, and look after children. And so a lot of what I'm going to say is really spoken about on this website. And it's important to know that I'm not speaking as an individual, but I'm really channeling what the experts in this field, our pediatric doctors, say, that it is safe to vaccinate your children. And in fact, it is not only it's safe for them, it is actually been well studied. We know right now that vaccines are approved for 12 and up in Pfizer, but I'm also expecting it to be 12 and up for Mrna really soon. The studies have already been done. They are in the process of applying to Health Canada, so it is really just a matter of time. The two vaccines, Mrna and Pfizer, are biologically identical, so I'm expecting it to be approved in the month of June. What about the younger kids? What about the ones under the age of 12? So there are studies underway both with Pfizer and Mrna looking at from 6 months to 11 years of age. And those studies are ongoing, but the preliminary evidence and the results of those trials indicate that children have an excellent response to these vaccines and that it's safe for children as well. We know that children do get COVID. And some children can get very sick with COVID, although it is not all children, but we have unfortunately had children who get very ill, who've ended up in hospital. We've had children in our hospitals in Guelph who've been very ill. So in order to keep our children healthy, the same as we would for all of the other vaccines, whether it's measles or tetanus or some of these other diseases, we have to look at how to keep our children safe. So that's one thing. And then when it comes to infertility, well, what I would say is when you see claims that are produced by various people on various websites, please, first of all, go and check who they are. They're physicians. A lot of times they're not physicians, but check to see if they're a physician. Check to see what they do for a living. Where do they work? What's their area of expertise? Look at credible websites. So I would really encourage you to look at either it's Health Canada or the CDC. You can look at our website. We will point you to credible websites. I think it's really important that you look at credible websites. And there is absolutely no evidence that, especially the mRNA vaccine, which is the one I usually hear about, produce infertility. And I just want to remind people there have been about 1.5 billion with a B vaccines given in the world. So there's very few studies that have looked at so many vaccines being given that if there were very rare events that occur with a vaccine, you are going to find it when you immunize 1.5 billion people. It really is a large, massive immunization effort. So, and the vaccines have been proven time and time again to be safe and effective.
Thank you, Nicola. Wow, I can tell you that I am sure Karen has gotten more information than she even anticipated or expected, not to mention all of those that are listening in. That is a wealth of information for us to go forward. Henry, Sarah says that she's noticing a considerable number of people who are nervous, hesitant, and worried about receiving Moderna as a vaccine and believe it is an inferior and or not as safe as Pfizer. So I'm going to have you and Nicola, you can go back and forth with this response. If we could start with you, and then Nicola can add some things in there.
So really, there is very little difference between those vaccines. The Moderna and Pfizer are both the same biology, the same technology. The only thing that's different is some of the ingredients that they're mixed with are a little bit different, but otherwise they are exactly the same. The same efficacy, the same low rate of serious complications and side effects after the vaccine. The reason why we're concerned about Moderna is because Moderna is a small company and they don't have the power of marketing like Pfizer does. So Pfizer's been able to get many more vaccines out because they're a powerhouse, a huge company, and they've marketed their vaccine very well. Whereas Moderna is a new company using the same technology with a great vaccine that has not been able to roll out their vaccine as quickly because they're smaller. And so the perception is that Moderna is not as good because they haven't been able to meet some of their delivery deadlines. That's not true. Exactly the same vaccine, essentially with the same effectiveness. I have no concern about Moderna at all.
And just to follow up, there have been some studies that looked at why do people prefer Moderna versus Pfizer? And the answer is the way the name sounds. So people like names with a Z, Pfizer. It sounds sexy, Pfizer. And they don't like Moderna, you know, like that. So it's kind of silly, but they've actually done some studies to say that people prefer the sound of the name Pfizer over Moderna. And just to throw another wrench into it, NACI today came out with a statement that says that basically they're interchangeable. So if you got Pfizer for your first dose, you could get Moderna for your second. If you got Moderna for your second, you get Pfizer for your first, you can get Pfizer for your second. So it's really, they are biologically identical, and I would have no qualms to recommend to anybody to get either. They're great.
Comes it down again to that fact versus fear, right? And
yes,
how much perception plays into this hesitancy.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. Joanne has asked that I like that, the Pfizer versus Moderna. You're right. Moderna sounds very serious and very, you know, like you know, you're being scolded. And Pfizer does sound very now. This person, Joanne says, or Joan says, I'm a senior and received AstraZeneca for my first vaccine in April at a pharmacy. And I understand that more specific guidelines regarding interval between first and second AstraZeneca vaccine doses are to be announced soon. And previously it was suggested that 3 months was ideal for the best efficacy. Do you have any updates? And hearing there have been less reported side effects with second doses.
Yes, I better jump in for this one because
Yes,
it's kind of hot off the press, shall we say.
Yes.
So the province is actually going to be distributing AstraZeneca, not the expired AstraZeneca, but AstraZeneca with, I believe the expiry date's the end of August, to pharmacies and to public health to distribute to primary care in the same amounts that we received it. So for people who received AstraZeneca, there will be a AstraZeneca dose 2 for you if you wish to have it. So the other part of that conversation is that NACI has also said today that if you, based on everything that you read, if you decide that you do not want to receive the second dose of AstraZeneca, that you can have a second dose of an mRNA vaccine, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer. So you have a choice. And I think the most important thing for everybody who's listening is you have a choice, and you should feel comfortable talking to your pharmacist or your primary care physician to talk to them about, please explain to me what my choices are. Please explain to me what the risk benefits are of both vaccines, because I want everybody to feel that those of you who had AZ, you did the right thing, and you're going to have a choice about what you want for your second dose.
You know what? I might post about that because I have to write an email to my patients who are about to receive their second shot next week. And so what I might do is put the information I'm going to put in the email, which is basically information they need to make a good consent. And I'll write a post about that. It's fairly simple, and it may help people make a decision.
Mm. Helen, there has been a lot of questions about AstraZeneca, a lot of fears about AstraZeneca, and a lot of information out there. How would you suggest someone handle those questions? Well, not the questions necessarily, but the fears that come along with that. I know you touched on some other things earlier, but are there some strategies that people can use to sort of filter out the fear?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think the most important thing right now is to really think about and be aware of that in terms of people are so fearful about it. Because again, I think sometimes that people think that their fears are facts. So I think that's the most important thing first and foremost, Marva, is to really separate that out and know that it is something that people are more worried about than is actually fact.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's all kinds of things that you can do to manage your fears, right? Once you really clearly identify that this isn't a fact, this is a fear that I'm holding, there are CBT techniques, so cognitive behavior therapy, which changes the way you think and the way you then behave and feel. Very simple things like journaling, like mindfulness, like meditation, talking with someone, expressing those fears so that you're not holding them in. If you're holding them in and not talking about them, then they become something much bigger and can certainly overwhelm you. You sometimes don't even need a professional to talk to. You can manage it with somebody that you love and care about. Just say, I'm really struggling with this and I'm really worried about this, and having someone walk you through it. But if it gets to the point that you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not able to fulfill some of the daily functions of life, it's impacting your relationships, that's when it's time to reach out and talk to a professional. And again, you can do that virtually. You can do that over the phone. You can go in and see somebody in person. So there are always options available for people. What we really don't want is people just to sit with it and not do anything, because then, of course, it becomes something that can make people both physically ill and really mentally unwell as well.
And of course, here 24/7. You've
Always.
indoctrinated me into that.
Yes.
Here 24/7.
When in doubt, you can call
yeah.
us at Here 24/7. If you don't have counseling services at your work, or you know, sometimes people want to reach out to their family doctor, which is great. Like whatever you do, there are options, but the message is just do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Helen. Nicola, someone asked, how come one can take off their mask, and they're asking you specifically. They actually said Dr. Mercer. That's how the question starts. How come one can take off their mask in an enclosed office if they're alone, but one cannot take off their mask in an enclosed cubicle? That is barriers surrounding the cubicle. That's really, really specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand that.
I'm hoping I can answer that one in a way that makes sense. But usually if you're in an enclosed office, it's got 4 walls, a ceiling, a door. Nobody can enter your space without actually knocking on your door and entering. So that would give you opportunity to put on your mask, to make sure that you're always physically distant. if you're in a cubicle, I can just speak to the cubicles that we have in our office. They are not closed at the top. The cubicles generally are about, from my height, they're usually a little bit below my eye level. You can enter them. Often there's more than one person in an area. They're multiple, so they are sort of separate but not enclosed. So we have in our workplace said that for people who work in cubicles, they do have to wear a mask, because the likelihood of within their work life of actually having people within their 6-foot circle is much greater. And so that was our premise for that. I hope that answers your question as to why cubicles are different than enclosed offices.
Right. Great answer, because I was trying to figure out the question. So that's wonderful. There are a number of questions that folks have asked about getting AstraZeneca at a pharmacy, and now they don't know when or who's going to get in touch with them for their second dose. Can you share a little bit about the process for that?
That one for me too, I guess.
Yeah. Yes,
so
please.
I'll keep answering
So
questions.
yeah, so I would say that, so you know where you received it. So the first place I would call is the place that you received it. Just for everybody to know, pharmacies now, the vast majority of pharmacies have either been given Moderna or Pfizer, one or the other, not both. Public health, we have both. But pharmacies will have one or the other. In addition to that, just today, the province is starting to distribute AstraZeneca to us, who we will then give it to primary care and to the pharmacies based on the schedule of which you received it. So the first people who received it are the first people who are going to get their second doses. So really call whoever you got the first dose, whether it's pharmacy, primary care, ask them when they're scheduling, ask them when they expect to receive the vaccine. If they don't have an answer for you, they should soon, because this is just hot off the press today, so they will know. Over the course of the remainder of the week, we will be sending out notices to pharmacies and primary care, telling them to get ready and to plan to vaccinate their patients with second doses.
Great. Thank you.
Nicola, can I ask a question? I think I know the answer on top of that. If I say have 25 people booked for a vaccine clinic next week, and half want to get Moderna and half want to get AstraZeneca, family physicians' offices are getting Moderna vaccines as well. So you should have the opportunity to choose between one or the other. The big concern is that once you open or poke a vial, you have to use that within a certain time period. So logistically, there may be some tweaking to do, but you should have access to either vaccine, the AstraZeneca or a messenger RNA vaccine.
That is correct. And it might require a little bit of a pre-counseling to see what patients are wanting before they come in, but they also may change their mind when they get in. And just for people who are listening, both of these vaccines, we have so many doses in a vial, we can't just put it back in the fridge. We have to find other people to give it to. So logistically, it's not quite as simple for the provider. So be patient with them as they try to put together enough people to open vials. So none of us want to waste vaccines.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Anne-Marie, is there any data about the common signs and symptoms of COVID for those with the vaccine that differs from mild symptoms without the vaccine?
Can you ask that again? Sorry.
Is there any data about the common signs and symptoms of COVID for those with the vaccine that differs from mild symptoms without a vaccine?
So are they talking about people who've been vaccinated who then go on to get COVID? I think that's probably what they're talking about. And whether or not, what are their side effects, or what is the illness like if you get COVID when you're vaccinated?
Versus the milder symptoms without a vaccine. Like if you don't have vaccine and you're asymptomatic or maybe just a little bit symptomatic versus if you have the vaccine.
So that's the great thing about being vaccinated is that if there's a good chance because of the effectiveness of the vaccines that you will not have COVID-19 transmitted to you. But if you do, because there is a small risk with the messenger RNA vaccines, about 7% chance, and a greater risk after the AstraZeneca vaccines, if you do, you're likely to get much more mild illness with mild signs and symptoms, and less likely to be hospitalized and develop serious illness. Does that answer the question, I hope?
I think it does in some ways. Did you want to add anything, Nicola?
Yeah, I think Anne-Marie is correct. I mean, I can tell you from, we have had very few people who've had symptomatic disease after being vaccinated, in particular after having 2 vaccines. Very few, and they've either been asymptomatic, and we've picked them up on screening at long-term care homes, or very mildly symptomatic. Most of these people are actually asymptomatic. They didn't even know they were sick. It was a screening swab for their work that they did. So the vaccines are extremely effective. Even 1 dose, you need 2 doses, but even 1 dose is extremely effective at preventing severe disease, hospitalization, and death.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Helen, what is worse, kids at low risk of getting COVID or losing it because they're home from school?
Well,
I give you the tough ones, Helen.
yeah, I was going to say, it's like saying what's worse, losing your arm or you're losing your leg. They're both pretty bad.
Yeah.
What I would say is, certainly any child that has COVID is not a good scenario, just because we don't know what the impact of that illness will be on the child. We certainly look at the research, and it tells us that children have far less of a serious case of COVID-19 than adults do, and certainly that seniors do, but we don't want anyone to get it. There's no question of that. What I would say is, if we can keep them physically safe and away from COVID, that's a very good thing. But at the same time, and it's a very good point, we need to protect and support their mental health, because we don't want that child going into a mental health crisis as well. We know that youth in particular are really struggling from the long-term, and it's been long-term, like this is 8 months that they've not been at school this year, many of these kids. So, we know that there are long-term consequences in terms of the impact of that social isolation, not being part of their peer group, not being connected to their teachers, their classrooms. Many of the really little kids, can you imagine being online for that many hours in a day? It's really, really hard. And then on top of that, you have the parent stress. They're managing working from home virtually, managing having their kids at home online learning. It's just an incredible amount to juggle. So the home can feel like a pressure cooker under those circumstances. And that's where everyone's mental health needs to be part of the discussion and conversation every day. The more parents can manage their own stress and wellness, that will help the kids find their own balance. And it really can be something that families do together. Go out for walks, play board games, talk about how stressful this is and what they need to do to support each other. Of course, all of that is age appropriate depending on your child. But I don't think there's a good answer to that question, other than to say we don't want them to get either. But certainly on the mental health side of things, there are a lot of preventative measures that we can put in place, and ongoing care for people, for children, youth, and families really struggling with mental health that we can support. We can really support the hell out of them.
I love that. Yes. Did we have a word this time around? Last time around we had a word. We had a word in May and we had one in April. I'm gonna give homework to you folks to come up with one of the words, or even remind us of the word that we had in May.
Well, the word in April was panger. You guys will remember that.
Yes,
that was
yes.
pandemic-induced anger.
Yes.
The word in May was languishing. So that was the word, but the space between, you're not doing really badly, but you're also not thriving. So you're somewhere in that middle where you're really stuck in a fog. That was languishing. I think the word tonight is coronaphobia. So coronaphobia is a new term that's been coined, and it's actually talking about people who are excessively fearful about contracting COVID, as well as re-engaging with our world. So they're really stuck in the 4 walls of their home in a really dark, fearful place. And they're really, really terrified. They're terrified of the physical part of COVID, the personal part, the job part, having their kids, having their aging parents. So that is what coronaphobia is. That's our new word.
Okay, coronaphobia for June.
And we have a poll up to try.
Yes, we have a great poll. Thank you, Allison, for that. How comfortable do you feel about getting back to normal? Super comfortable, can't wait to see people again. Most comfortable, I'll still be cautious. Somewhat comfortable, I am still concerned the pace that we will open up, and not ready. Happy to stay as things are. Would love for you to answer that question for us. Thank you, Allison, for that. So let me just throw in a question here until the response comes up, which I'm sure it'll come up right away. Going forward, here it is. I knew it would happen as soon as I started talking. So it's really quite good. So we have a good 70% are in the most comfortable to super comfortable range. And then we have somewhat comfortable to not ready, 31%. So between 69 and 31%, there's something in there, 1% off, but that is good news. I think we're moving as people get their second dose of vaccine and more people are vaccinated. I imagine this comfort level will be higher, and would be very interested in the poll at the end of June. As you said, Nicola, we want everybody to be vaccinated, at least have the first vaccine by June. That way it doesn't impede folks getting the second vaccine. We want to make sure that there's enough going around. So thank you so much for those who responded to the poll. That's very helpful. That's good for us to see, and really ties in with what Helen was talking about with kids and things getting back to normal.
Can I add to that,
Yes.
Mrna, that those answers, and many of these answers, are really based in personality. And so there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about your history, your state of mental health, history of trauma, your personality. We're all very different. And so those people who are super ready, great. That might be your personality and your experience. But those that are cautious, that's great too. That's your personality and experience. And I don't condone people who spread misinformation. The extreme folks, I do not agree with that at all. But other people are doing that based on fear that's coming from them. So I try my best to even accept people's reaction to the whole crisis, which may not seem right to most of us at all.
So there's what you're saying is that there's a huge differentiation, what I'm hearing you say, between folks who are legitimately cautious, careful, and sometimes afraid because it's part of who they are, and others who would try to stoke some of those fears, right? Probably based on misinformation.
Right.
And so somewhere in there, hopefully what we're doing here, thank you, Tracy and Anne-Marie, that conceived this, is providing some of that information for those who have legitimate fears and real questions. And I think all fears are legitimate. I shouldn't say that. All fears are legitimate. We're just concerned with those who would want to spread misinformation intentionally. And another question someone has, and this happens, I think this question probably comes up a lot. If the Pfizer vaccine is 70 to 80% effective, and so one dose would prevent severe illness or death, why the second dose? Nicola, please.
She's waving.
I had to jump in when I heard 70 to 80% effective, because I have to say that that's not correct. There was a wonderful study out in Canada, in Ontario, through Public Health Ontario, that looked at every single person who's received a vaccine between December and the beginning of May. And what we discovered that with one dose, your chances of getting symptomatic COVID with one dose was 0.06%, 0.06%. So that's how low it was in the study. And this was based on every single dose of vaccine that was given, all comers. So the vaccines
so I have to admit,
effective.
Sorry, Nicola, I have to tell you that I read that question incorrectly. That's my first time. I think I'm allowed one. I was paraphrasing the question. I paraphrased it incorrectly. The person said, if we're aiming for 70 to 80% of the population in Ontario vaccinated, and one dose prevents severe illness or death. So Melissa, you've got your act together. I messed up. Why the second dose? So I messed up there. Is that making more sense?
It does. I'm coughing, so I hope I can get through the answer.
Sorry about that. Yes.
So the reason for a second dose is for longevity and for protection against the variants. So what we do know is, in particular, the B1617.2, which is the Indian variant, or the South African variant. These variants seem to require people to receive 2 doses of vaccine. And so for that reason, we're recommending 2, but really it's also about longevity. So the first is a prime, what we call, you prime your system, and the second one is for longevity.
That's
Hopefully
great.
that answers.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Thank you for getting me out of a jam too. That's great. And I know, Nicola, you've got a bit of a tickle or a cough there, and we understand if you need to get a drink of water or something. We know you need your voice for other things other than us, so we'll completely understand that.
Can I spin off what Nicola just said, just to
Yes.
clarify and to reiterate how important it is to get your first dose right now if you haven't already had it, so that by the end of the summer you have 2 doses, because there is a very low level of the variant that comes from India. We are now calling it, I think, the Delta variant. Am I right? Can't be sure. World Health Organization came out with a new naming system yesterday. I haven't memorized it yet. But that variant, the 2 doses of vaccines protects against that variant, but one might not, or not very well. So the sooner all of us get 2 doses, the better. Get your dose in June so you can be fully vaccinated by the fall. And if the variants start to pick up in our community, you are protected against them.
Right. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Helen, what is the best thing that we can do to help and support our exhausted medical caregivers in the region, besides following the rules and getting vaccinated? Lisa has asked that question.
So you mean healthcare professionals who are exhausted themselves? Yeah, so we're definitely seeing that. It's been a very, very long haul. And the journey is still ongoing, right? They still have to be in there every single day, whether it's a primary care office, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a mental health and addictions agencies like mine. It's all, everyone is doing their very best. Our health system is at full capacity, and I would say our health system is exhausted, full on. So again, it's an interesting group to try and support, and I'm sure Nicola and Anne-Marie will agree with me on this. As healthcare professionals, we are trained to support and help others. It's often hard for us to recognize and see our own need and our own level of needing help. We are so trained in supporting others and looking at their needs. So that's, I think, the most important thing is for each of us as healthcare professionals to check in with ourselves. The very support that we're offering other people, we also need to offer to ourselves to say, how am I really doing? If you think of a water line, right? Where is the water line? Is it at my chin? Is it at my nose? Is it above my head? And how am I doing? Am I treading water? Am I underwater? Those are the kinds of questions we need to ask ourselves and be really honest with ourselves. Do we need a break from work? Do we need to step back? Do we need a couple of days off? These are the times and the opportunities that we really need to increase our self-care as well. We can't just rely on our general level of resilience because that ran out last fall. We need to add things to our toolkit like, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, massages, having someone cook some meals for us as well. Like there's all kinds of things that you can do. And then of course, that's just the general stuff. There is lots of help and support for healthcare professionals, whether it is through one of our agencies, whether it's through their own family doctor, or counseling services. You can do that virtually, you can do that anonymously, you can do it in person. There's tons of options, but it really starts, Marva, with the person recognizing that they weren't worn, even though they're a healthcare professional, none of us wear capes. We're all humans first, and we all need to check in with ourselves and look at our own level of need and support required.
And if you wear a cape, it doesn't really work the way it works in the movies.
No,
So let me
not at
ask
all.
Anne-Marie. I'm going to ask Anne-Marie directly and then ask Nicola as well. What do you do to try for self-care to the extent that you are comfortable responding? Certainly you don't have to respond to it, but I'm just checking in with you. What are some things that you do or what you would tell your staff to do? Anne-Marie.
I make sure that I'm home at a decent time every night, even if it means I'm on Zoom after that. And I spend at least an hour eating with a meal with my husband so that we can both debrief and connect, because we're each other's biggest support. And the level of support you can get from a person that you're close to is pretty significant. I've taken to power walking every noon hour and exercising like a fiend on the weekend. And I noticed that when I miss that walk or that exercise in a day, I'm much more stressed by the end of the day. I also have a constant flow of internal thoughts where I'm actually checking my mood. How are you doing now? I'm reassuring myself not to be anxious. You'll be okay. I'm naming it when I feel a certain way and then responding to how I feel. I'm watching really good BBC series, Netflix programs, and not very much, because I find that makes me depressed, but just an hour a night where I just shut everything off and get into a good show. Those are just some of the things that I'm doing.
Thank you. And what are you doing, Nicola, for yourself? How are you able to finding your balance?
I think for me, I'm a yogi, so I try to do my daily yoga. And I do try to walk as well every day. Actually, one of the things I did right before this was quickly go out and do my usual walk so that I get that in. I think that one of the things about both yoga and walking is you can practice mindfulness while you are doing it. And so I find that for myself personally something that I need to do, as well as I'm a public health physician, so I do try to eat healthy and practice a healthy lifestyle in addition. So.
No, that's good to know. That's good to know. We'll check in with you as well, because as Helen says, so right, we talk about others and how we help others and we share that, but sometimes we sort of forget about ourselves. So I think what you're able to share might be helpful to someone who is listening right now, who's in the healthcare profession or in other professions where they're on the front lines of COVID-19 and need to hear from you, our superheroes without cape. Without the cape, Helen. So the next question I want to ask is, going forward, will we need to operate with a different set of gathering guidelines as a vaccinated population with those who are unvaccinated? This person has said, I'm reading about double dose vaccinated people being able to gather en masse and not distance. Does this apply to friends and family who won't get vaccinated? This is a tough question. Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll jump in first because Nicola will have a different answer, I think. I think there's no answer to that just yet. And I think people are really anxious to have permission to gather in large crowds because we're watching other people in other countries do that. And everyone's really anxious to take their masks off. We're nowhere near ready for that. But I have complete faith in the system that will tell us when we are ready to do that. So hang on, it's not time yet.
So the only, and I wish I had a definite answer. Everybody keeps asking me this. I believe the time will come over the course of the summer, but it may not, but I think we still have a little ways to go yet. I mean, we need to get more people with second doses. And so it's going to be the summer of the second dose. And it's important to have the second dose because of these circulating variants. So we need to protect our population. And I really think that the other piece is how many people are actually going to roll up their sleeves. We need a minimum of 75%, but honestly, 90% is better. Like the more people we have, if we got to 90% in our community, we would have a really safe community with double doses. What can we do to get there? 75% is good, but 90 is better.
That's great. And someone mentions, thank you all so much for your work in being strong leaders in our community. Can you spend a little bit of time addressing the vaccine effectiveness against the variants? And I know we touched on that a wee bit, why 2 doses are necessary. So I'm just going to leave it with Nicola. Looks like she's ready to answer that question.
Sorry, I'm typing, so I'm trying to do an Anne Marie. She's much better than me. She can do so many more questions than I can.
I love that. I love that.
What we know is, and I'm going to talk about AZ, and I'm going to talk about the two mRNA vaccines. So I'm going to talk about whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, think of them as the same. So these vaccines, they work really well against the wild type. And remember that when they were developed, that's what we had was what I call the wild type. It wasn't actually the first one out of Wuhan, but it was the one that went all around the world. And both of them were tested against that and were very effective. As the variants have come out, and it is normal and to be expected, especially with coronaviruses. Thank goodness this isn't an influenza virus because they change even much faster, but coronaviruses do change. And the fact that they are changing, they are not necessarily always changing in a way that means that they are escaping the vaccine. So I think that's really important. Most of the time, what you're seeing with the way that they are changing is they are changing to become more infectious. So the B117, which is actually the one that we have now in Ontario, that is, if you get a COVID in Ontario, you're most likely infected with B117 or the UK variant. Started in the UK, but now here it is in Ontario. The why is because it was highly infectious. In fact, it was so infectious it actually outcompeted the South African variant in parts of the world where there are both, and it also outcompeted the Brazilian variant in areas where there are both for the most part. We do have the Indian variant coming, which does appear to be 50% more infectious than B117. If that is the case, the UK variant, so that is the case, then we would anticipate that over time it would become the dominant variant. Remembering though that these particular viruses need human hosts, they need to go human to human. So if we are able to vaccinate lots of people, then we won't have a lot of viruses circulating. But when I just want to caution people though that we are going to have to learn to live with coronaviruses or COVID for a very, very long time. Like this is going to become now part of our winters, part of our, when you present with a cold to your family doctor or to emerge with pneumonia, it is going to be now part of our new normal. We have to think about that. And so for people who think, oh, well, I don't have to get vaccinated, I can just kind of wait it out. If you don't get vaccinated, you will eventually get COVID. You may actually get a strain of COVID like the Indian variant, which potentially is a much worse strain than the people who got it, a year ago, who got the wild type. So it is something to think about. What I can tell you, it's early studies. Remember, we don't have large population studies for any of them, this Indian variant yet. What I can tell you is that 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna seem to have pretty good effectiveness. So that's encouraging, less so with the AstraZeneca. But they do seem to have pretty good effectiveness with 2 doses of the mRNA. And all manufacturers are working on potential boosters if we should need a booster. So that is the one advantage of the mRNA vaccines. They're actually fairly quick to produce.
And that may be one reason why, what you just mentioned, Nicola, why people may want a messenger RNA vaccine as their second dose, because there is evidence that shows that the AstraZeneca vaccine is less effective against the variants. So as you're trying to make that decision, and again, I'll try to post about this, that's one thought to keep in mind. Although AstraZeneca does still reduce the risk dramatically for serious illness, you might want to consider the messenger RNA vaccine as your second dose. Am I allowed to say that? I just did.
Yeah, I think it's you just. I think it's reasonable to say that for people who have any fear of the second dose AstraZeneca, knowing the facts, knowing that the real bad complication called VIT is much more rare with the second dose. But for people who are still nervous about that, what we can say is that a second dose of an mRNA vaccine, people have really good immune response, like a really good immune response. And they do sometimes get a few more symptoms, but the symptoms aren't bad symptoms. They're not things like VIT, which are really bad symptoms. They're things like headache, aches and pains, a bit of fever, chills, things that are annoying, but not life-threatening.
Great. I think we're down to probably the last 2 or 3 questions. We got a lot of questions, certainly about AstraZeneca. And I think when we had the conversation about the mixing vaccines, as well as the timelines, and I think we've answered a lot of those questions posed once, but many questions came in. So hopefully those who are listening, you heard your response, and I'm hoping that you had signed on when the responses were being shared with you. Another area where we received a lot of questions, it seems, especially the latter part of the hour is children going back to school. And I'll just read this long one and hopefully we'll cover all the others that have come in. I'm having a difficult time understanding why children are still online learning and not allowed to go back to school for the last month. They have been struggling with online for the last year, and it's been a big issue for parents as well. The cases went down a lot this week, so I'm asking, why can't children go back to school for this last month before patios, stores, etc. reopen? It feels unfair to children who have missed out a lot on their lives this past year. So Nicola, maybe start with you.
I'll start, and then maybe Anne-Marie or somebody can jump in.
Yeah.
First of all, I believe that our children can attend school safely if the schools reopen. But the schools reopening is not my decision. Okay, I really have to say that. I cannot tell you how many emails I get asking me to reopen the schools. I do not have that power, guys. I do not. If schools are closed through the province, through the Ministry of Education, and through cabinet. So I can't open them. And to be honest, I do know that there are a lot of other variables that are in play here, including things like the Indian variant, which is now spreading within Ontario. Not a lot, but it is definitely here. And the fact that if we reopen the schools and reopen the economy, I think there's a fear of what the number of cases that are going to go up, especially in parts of the province where we don't quite have enough vaccine yet. So it is complicated, but I will say, and I'll say it really publicly, that I do believe our children should be at school. I think it is good for them, and it has been my recommendation, as well as all of the Council of Medical Officers of Health, that we reopen the schools.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that response. And
Might
maybe
be a good time, Mrna, for me just to jump in with some good news.
yes, and can I do something here as well,
Sure.
Helen? I have a question for you. So in addition to your good news, someone mentioned the changes in their 10-year-old, their behavior, their mental health, and was talking about we do our best to encourage talking outside time, safe socializing, etc. But because of the year and being home from school, it's been tough. And they're asking for recommendations to suggest for when the recovery happens, when things return to normal, what are some things that they can do? So perhaps in the information that you wanted to share, the good news, if you could start off by just addressing that a wee bit, that would be great.
Sure. So I would, sorry, was it about a 10-year-old, did you say?
Yes, a 10-year-old.
Okay.
Trying to get back to normal. What does normal, how can they ease back into normal?
Yeah, so I think like all of us, slow and steady wins the race, right? We want to look at the personality characteristics of that 10-year-old, as Anne-Marie mentioned earlier, and it's so true of all of us. We're all very different people. There are some people that are going to absolutely rush back to embracing life, and there's other people that are going to be very, very fearful and cautious. So I would say, what's the personality characteristics of this 10-year-old? What are the things that are unique to them? And it might be that you have to either slow them down because they want to rush too much, or you have to kind of push them a little bit and set some small achievable goals so that they can start to increase their comfort slowly. Either a family can help with that, or you can certainly seek some professional advice. But I think having the 10-year-old lead the way as much as possible in terms of their own comfort, with you kind of walking beside them, is a really good way to approach it. I will say the good news part is that as of today, there was a really amazing announcement from the Ministry of Health to announce more children's mental health funding across the province. And I can tell you locally, it's really good news for us. So what it means for us is that the youth hubs, which we have been working on as a community, actually Rotary championed, Guelph Rotary championed the idea of creating youth hubs across Guelph and Wellington County. We've been working on this for the last couple of years, a number of us across the system, a number of different agencies. There are 3 youth hubs that currently exist in Wellington County and a number of them that are going to be opening in Guelph. All of them will be connected into one model, and it's basically a one-stop shop for youth. They can show up anywhere between the ages of 12 and 26 and have all of their needs met, whether it's mental health, education, employment support, conflict with their parents, conflict with a girlfriend, whatever it might be. Show up, and our job at the Youth Hub is to help you and make sure you get that support. So the Youth Hubs are receiving $650,000 from the province of Ontario. Then on top of that, Wellington County is contributing $420,000 specifically for the Youth Hubs in rural Wellington, which is an amazing support. So, and then on top of that, CMHA is receiving some additional funding for children's mental health. So we're adding some additional positions to support kids with really complex mental health issues. All in all, it's about a $1.3 million day for us in Guelph, Wellington, all of which is going to kids and youth. So we're super excited.
That's
and
great.
we know it's desperately needed. So this is actually a great time for families to reach out. I will also say that the school boards receive some new funding as well, and they're going to be offering programs throughout the summer as well as into the fall. Their mental health supports are going to be increased as well, which is great news.
And can I add to that, which is fantastic information, Helen, thank you for sharing that the youth hubs were co-created with youth as well. So, so it's not adults where it's necessarily top down. Youth had a hand in what it looked like, what it felt like, what kind of culture, their physical space they're creating. So the great leadership in making all of that happen.
Yes, special shout out to Cindy Forsyth.
Yes, Cindy Forsyth,
who is just
she might be listening right now too.
Oh, just amazing.
She doesn't like it. She feels uncomfortable about it, but we like to shout her out.
Absolutely. It's incredible.
So there's one final question here, and we're going to be as brief as possible so that you can have maybe 30 seconds of closing remarks, something that you want folks that are listening to leave us with. It's long, but it's something that is out there, and I'm going to try to read through it very quickly. It could be greatly appreciated if you could speak to the recent discussion surrounding the newly discovered potential risk related to the vaccine in infants who are breastfeeding. The person said that a U of G professor, I don't know how much we can get into this, presented this content last week. They said, I contacted U of G as well as public health about the content of the podcast. And the responses I received did not speak to my questions regarding these new data findings and possible risks for breastfeeding infants. I do not have hesitancy to receive the vaccine personally, but concerned about the impact on my breastfeeding infant. Thank you kindly for all that you do and your guidance. And then the person says, to note, thank you to public health for a detailed response. Public health advised that there are currently no known risk. However, the decision to get the vaccine while breastfeeding should be weighed with risk of exposure. And she said, my risk exposure is extremely low. I have an appointment booked for this week, but I'm considering delaying this. This is the risk exposure consideration. Is this the risk exposure consideration being referred to? So she's told a story, and hopefully you got from that. It sounds like her question is about risk exposure and the information that was shared by this professor. So Anne-Marie, I'm going to go over to you.
So I'm going to answer briefly and then hand it to Nicola, because my answer is actually in last night's post. So I addressed the concerns that people were commenting on the post on the Facebook page about the information that was coming out of or coming from this professor from the University of Guelph. And I think the infogram that I posted last night answers a lot of those questions. The answer to your question is rather lengthy, but we can say that there are great concerns about the information that was shared, and the risk to suckling infants, so to speak, as far as we know, is non-existent if the woman's been vaccinated. Nicola, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I think whenever you have concerns about something that you read or something that you hear, I think you need to just ask questions. And I really encourage people who are listening to go to the kidshealthfirst.ca website It's got excellent information. It's by pediatricians. It's for children, infants, for parents to understand. These are people who are researchers and physicians for children, infants. So vaccines are safe for kids. They are safe for moms. I think we are going to find out very soon that children as young as 6 months will likely be able to receive the mRNA vaccines. I think it's just a matter of time. The research is ongoing, and there has been no safety concerns in young ones receiving these vaccines. If you are breastfeeding and you have some vulnerable family member in your home that cannot be vaccinated, so obviously the infant cannot be vaccinated. Do not have a vaccine for children under the age of 12 right now. So for people who have in their home children and you want to protect your children, the best way to protect your children is to get yourself vaccinated and to get the people around them vaccinated. This is a strategy we do for influenza as well. For sometimes people with influenza, they don't develop a good immune response to a vaccine. So we try to prevent them from getting ill by circling them with a defense. So the same thing for all vulnerable people. If you are concerned about the fact that you are breastfeeding and receiving a vaccine, I encourage you to you can look at the literature. You can go to the Kids Health First website. I have no concerns with you receiving a second dose of an mRNA vaccine and continuing to breastfeed.
Right.
Marva, can I just mention there's a recurring
Yes.
question that I don't think we've addressed.
Yes.
That's that if you have had your first dose of AstraZeneca or a messenger RNA vaccine outside of the Guelph, Wellington, Dufferin public health mass vaccination clinics, can you sign up for a second dose through public health?
Mhm.
Yeah, the best way to do that, though, because you've gone elsewhere, is to give us a call. And then we can check your information on COVAX, because everybody in the whole province of Ontario has their data entered into COVAX. You had to present your health card number when you got your vaccine. So we will know what vaccine you got and where you got it. We have found some people are trying to get second doses of different vaccines or earlier because I guess they don't realize that we have all this information in COVAX. So we do have it. So if you want to get a second dose, in fact, you actually don't even have to get your second dose in theory through public health. If your primary care physician has it, if it was a Mrna that you got elsewhere, or you can get a Mrna following a Pfizer, or you can go to a pharmacy. So there are options for you, but yes, you can get it local.
Nice.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So can I ask each of you for 30 seconds before I ask Tracy to come back on and close for us, parting remarks, but just 30 seconds. We're a little tiny bit over. We don't usually run over, but we're a little bit over today. There's a lot of concerns, a lot of questions answered in a very deep, thoughtful, thorough, and very effective way. I think it serves our community well. So thank you all so very, very much. And I'm going to go backwards from where I started. Maybe start with Nicola and then go to Emery and then Helen.
You caught me unaware. I thought I was going to be last, so I was typing
well, you can be last if you want to. You can always pass it over.
I think that this session has really helped me to understand the amount of questions in particular about the AstraZeneca vaccine that are out there. I think that's number one. I sort of a real takeaway for me to try to do, try to get information out to people so that you feel that you have the information to make health choices. I think the next takeaway for me is really sort of the level of concern when people read things, whether it's on the internet or whether it's in other locations. And so I just say that for people who are listening that, if you have questions, first place, go to your primary care doctor, your family doctor. That's a really good place to start if you have questions about things that you read in the literature and you need somebody to help you understand.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you so much for being here. We know how super busy you are and trying to balance life, and we are really appreciative of your time. And we'd love for you to come back, keep coming back. Right, guys? Right, everybody? Yep. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Henry?
I have two takeaways. I am going to write 2 posts. One will talk about how to deal with misinformation and conspiracy theories, and how to take a an approach to information that you've received, break it down, and decide whether or not you want to listen to that information or not. Because there is a stepwise sequence of steps that you can take to see if misinformation is true or not. And the other one was to write a post about the differences between AstraZeneca and Moderna, and whether, just to help you make the decision about whether to get the second AZ shot or the second messenger RNA vaccine.
Great. Thank you, Henry. Helen?
So I would just suggest my takeaway for tonight is really just to monitor how you really are doing, and those people close to you as well, whether they're your kids or your aging parents. There's a lot of good news out there in terms of our COVID numbers decreasing, our vaccination numbers increasing, some new funding coming into our system. There's some really good news for us to celebrate, but we also know it's been a really tough year, and there continues to be tough news we have to absorb as well. So it's not a light switch. It isn't all of a sudden, okay, great, we feel awesome, we're back out into the real world. It's going to take us some time to work through the experience that we've all been through together. Give yourself that patience, give yourself permission just to not feel great still, even though the weather's beautiful and, you know, we should be feeling better by now and the restrictions are starting to ease. All of those are good things, but just allow yourself to slowly and carefully readjust to the world that you're in and that we're getting used to again. And a great time just to reach out and get some support as you make this transition so that you can feel grounded and really get some support for yourself and your family. Please don't hesitate to do that. Our Here 24/7 lines are literally open 24/7. We can connect you to care that's available, and we can offer that care in multiple ways. So we're here to support you, and if you need it, please reach out. We're all here.
That's great. And welcome back, Tracy. That opened our session with some really wonderful words. Filling in, I commit. Tracy, please.
Thank you. So I just want to thank you all again, and especially Marva for moderating all those questions. It's not easy to see the questions coming in and making sure that everybody's been heard, and bringing questions together when there's multiple. So it's very tricky, and Marva, you do a beautiful job of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Just a reminder, everybody, that this is not just happening here, it's happening globally. This all started because Bracelet of Hope is the charity that Anne-Marie founded in Lesotho, Africa, and I'm the chair of the board. We launched a mobile health unit in March, and it is now testing for COVID in very remote areas of Africa that would have no chance for that. So not just testing and treating for HIV, but COVID as well as maternal health. So it's incredible what we're doing. So if you have the ability, if you could go to Bracelet of Hope's website, you can check us out. And if you're able to donate, we would be very grateful. We are saving towards a second mobile unit at the moment. And just to put it in context, we have seen over 9,000 people in that mobile unit in only a year. So 9,000 people got treatment because of that mobile health unit. So if you're able to, we would be very grateful. If you're looking to support local, Hope House is doing incredible things for our local community. And so we support Hope House as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in. We're very grateful. Let's all, again, keep the Gay Pride Month. Thank you for mentioning that, Marva, close in our hearts. And also with it being National Indigenous History Month. Let's just keep this forefront of our mind, keep learning and growing together. And we'll see you next time. And thank you to the panel again, and we'll see you all. Take good care, and we'll see you next month.
See you July 6th. Thank you. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.